Okay, so thanks everybody for coming out for a continuation of our afternoon session today up at the Hillcrest for our Community Economic Development Forum, which is focused on looking at poverty reduction as an economic issue as opposed to the traditional, leave it to the social sector, which I don't believe that one bit. I don't think anybody else in this room really sees things that way at this point either. So before we get started, just a few housekeeping things. If you could please check your cell phones are on silent, if you could. That would be great. If you need a bathroom facility, they're just out this way to the left towards the library. And yeah.
Front row.
So I'd really like to thank our sponsors again for the conference. Downey Timber, one of our largest, well, the largest employer we have in town, the Columbia Basin Trust, Russell Credit Union, and the Community Futures Association of BC. Really thank you to all those organizations who generously helped make this conference happen. And then with that, passing it over to Jill to introduce our speaker for the day.
So I won't go into as lengthy an introduction as I did today at the conference, because many of you were here today. But I just wanted to say to the folks that weren't there this afternoon how excited we are as a community to have Mark here. We've been, as a poverty reduction advocate, we've been working with Vibrant Communities Canada since we started doing our poverty reduction strategy in 2012. And Vibrant Communities Canada has just been an incredible wealth of resource in terms of just connecting us with best practices in other communities and everything. And that's what their job is. They're trying to connect cities, reducing poverty with the lofty goal of reducing poverty for 1 million Canadians. And we're getting there. The more we work together, the more we will get there. So Vibrant, Mark has just recently become the director of Vibrant Communities Canada, and we're very, very fortunate to have Mark here in our community. We did a wonderful keynote this afternoon at our forum, just setting the stage and putting it into the context of what poverty really looks like in our communities, and that face of lived experience, and kind of the data about social and economic inequality in our country, and kind of some systemic barriers to moving forward. But what is really just really exciting for me is just that, I was just saying to Mark that while we see poverty reduction as one of the greatest social development challenges of our time, it's also one of the greatest economic development opportunities of our time. And I think to kind of shift that way of thinking, will help us move forward. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Mark. And he can
So for those of you who are with me this morning, there's not too much of the same stuff. There's a little bit, just for context. And for those of you who weren't, how many were not at the morning session? Right, so I spent quite a bit of time in the morning showing a lot of data. So data about Canadian debt, about GDP, about how EI isn't really doing its job. Lots and lots of data. I'm not repeating all that. I'll give you a little taste of some of it. But there was to try just to put in front of all of us what the data is without getting into an argument about it, right? So one of the things I said in the morning was sometimes, especially when we're a diverse group, I mean diversity comes in many shapes and sizes, but we're business, we're social sector, we're government. We could be also university education, teachers, all that kind of diversity. We tend to move too quickly to what's different about us and what we don't agree with, as opposed to trying to look at things together and understand things together and find out where we actually are on the same page about what we understand and want to do something about. So that's kind of my mission. Is kind of a very subtle way of advocating, if you think about it. Let's try to get together, understand the same things, and then rally around the things we want to do together, as opposed to debate the social sector versus the business sector, because if we keep doing that, we'll never end poverty, for one thing. And if we keep doing that, we'll never act on the great economic opportunities that actually poverty reduction provides. And I go actually a little further. If we don't do something about, if we don't actually turn poverty around, our economies won't be as healthy as they need to be. And if I ask you all, are you in favor of a healthy, robust economy? Like, who would say, oh no, I'm not interested? I'm not interested in that, right? Whereas sometimes we're a little iffy about this poverty reduction thing. I think they're the same thing. We just talk about it in a different way. So I'm going to do a little variation on what we did this morning and ask a question. A little different than what I asked. And in fairness to the folks there this morning, I only gave you a minute or two to talk. I just want you to turn to someone next to you, or if you want to do it in threes, and I want you to answer that question to each other. Why are people poor? And I will give you, I'll give you 2 or 3 minutes to have the conversation, and then we'll chat a little bit about it, and then I'm going to move into the presentation. So why are people poor? Talk to your partner or in threes for a little bit about that question.
One of the things that has to and the commonality is, I swear, everyone has experienced which is well, and then they carry that and I think it's a lot of
Because if you do, we can move on to the next question. Okay, now let's solve this problem. How many of you in your conversations talked about money? already quite a bit about money. But what else did you talk about? Just shout it out.
Systemic barriers.
Systemic barriers?
Political structures.
Political structures?
Life circumstances.
I can't hear you.
Life circumstances.
Life circumstances.
Generational.
Generational poverty? Yeah. What else?
Mental illness?
Lack of opportunity?
Mental illness?
Mental illness, did you say? Yeah. Or just illness?
In a for-profit society, there's no money exchanged for parenting. So that's why some people are poor, because they want to look after their kids.
That's correct. Or family break up, and when usually the woman's responsible for the children in a single parent family. So we tend to gravitate, all our measures about poverty are usually around money. Right? Low income measure, LICO, everything comes down, even though we say it's not about money, that's how we measure it. When really, those of you who are with me this morning, if money doesn't do anything, money sits. If you put all your money on a table, it'll just sit there. It won't do anything. It's what people do with money, right? And of course, the more you have, the more you can do, and the more choices you have than if you have a little. But money by itself is just money, right? It doesn't do anything. It's what we decide to do with the money that exists in our own pockets, but also in the community. Some of the definitions we've used that I've come across and also used, they sit on the Mayor's Task Force in Edmonton, not 10 poverty. We also talk about this, many of the things you did, but being deprived and denied. So people who are deprived of those things or denied those things that will help them have a good life. How would you describe good life, right? And that's an important one because sometimes we think people are poor just because of what they do. People are denied things. They're denied access to things. They're denied access to an adequate income when they're in a jam. They're denied things because they're not white, or they're brown, or they're Aboriginal, or whatever. So being poor is also about what others do. We use the word marginalized people, right? Nobody marginalizes themselves. We marginalize people. Like no one who we would consider marginalized sits around thinking, yeah, I think I'm marginalized. I kind of dig that. You know, we do it to others, and I think that's an important thing to remember. So, if you don't mind, I'm gonna. It's kind of awkward, so I'm gonna sit and drive the boat here. I want to talk a little bit about the types of poverty, just since there's so many people in the room. So there's poverty that exists that's very transitional. Lots of people will move in and out of poverty, especially when you're young. When I was younger, I had jobs and I lost jobs, and I found another job, and my income was doing this, but I was okay. Sometimes a little poorer than I wished to be. So transitional poverty, maybe because you've lost your job, or even if you're in school. Usually those things will settle themselves. But if we have more and more people who are in transition, and we're not providing the supports they need, people who are in transitional poverty could become chronically poor. The fellow wearing a suit and showing us his iPad might become the guy to his right. Chronic homelessness is typically described as somebody, a chronic poverty is usually described as someone who's been poor for around 10 years or more. I don't know why it's 10 years, that's just how some of our researchers, that's what they tell us. But it's a long time. And the more chronic you are in terms of poverty, the harder it is to help you out of poverty. The longer you're in that condition, the more it's going to cost. And the harder it will be, and your success rate will be far less than people in transitional poverty. And then there's intergenerational poverty. It's just really passed down from parent to kid to parent to kid, for whatever reason. I mean, if you grew up living in a car, what else do you know? If you grow up not really ever being able to go to school very often, what chance do you have? And intergenerational poverty is the hardest to overcome, it takes the longest. And so in a poverty reduction strategy, we need to be looking at all three. And certainly when somebody is in a transitional phase, let's help them as soon as we can. So that's done. Get them back into the swing of things so they're an active person in community. With chronic and intergenerational, we have to start thinking about how do we get innovative, creative around that. I also talked about this morning vulnerability factors, and these are things that could happen to any of us. And if you read them, like disruptive events, you could lose your job. And you know, if you don't have a lot of money, say, it won't take long until you're in a bad way. And you might, you know, so if you own a home and you can't make your mortgage payment, you'll get some grace, but eventually the bank comes calling. Or you get injured. And so you might get injured and you might have some benefits when you're injured, but your benefits never match your income. So if you can, disruptive events can turn your life around. And I worked a lot on the streets in Edmonton. I've done a lot of on-the-ground work, both as a street worker and then as a CEO of 2 inner-city agencies. And I would meet homeless people on the street, and they were like you and me, teachers, business owners, accountants, oil riggers, it's in Alberta. I mean, just taxpayers. Like they were us. And some of them had these kinds of events, an illness, loss of a loved one, loss of one's wife, and they went over the deep end. You know, I knew an Indian, a native chief from Saskatchewan who flipped out because his brother was murdered in front of his eyes by some young white guys, and he just couldn't handle it. He ended up being a chronic alcoholic for the rest of his life. Not excusing that, I'm just saying that's what happens. And so when we see these people, you know, on the street, or, I mean, we don't know their histories. And I'm suggesting they're pretty much like ours. Educated people, came across lots of people that had gone to university. So homelessness is not about people of a certain type. It's not a homogeneous group. There's also life stages. So in our plans around poverty reduction, as you head out to the world as a young person, you're often like not all that great. You have a lot of money, but you're sometimes more resilient or able to go back to mom and pop in between things. Not everybody, but as you become an adult, then you get married, and then you have kids. All these life stage things impact one's ability to exist, right? And then you get divorced, and then who's taking care of the kids? Say that like that's a fait accompli. You know, divorce rate's pretty high, right? So we have a lot more and more single parent families, and that's a life event that can totally change, like almost overnight, a woman's or a single dad's financial situation. And then systemic barriers. I mean, there are people when they look at resumes and see a foreign name, they just pass them by. We know that's true. And we also know, I think if we're honest with each other, sometimes we're uncomfortable around people we know that aren't like us. Let's just put it that way. We're uncomfortable. So what is that? You know, why do we feel that way, and how does that impact our decisions? So discrimination and racism are huge systemic barriers. There's no and it's a systemic barrier, not a system like a structure. There's no racist system that we've created, but there is racism in our community, in our country. Those things, they stop people from having, who said lack of opportunity, right? People don't have opportunities. So let me talk to you about just a couple things that leads into something else I want to talk about. So when we're injured or we're ill, we want to heal, right? We want to get better. We don't want to learn how to live with our pain and suffering. We don't want a doctor to say, you know what? Or let's say the government, it's just too expensive to cure you, to heal you. It's like, but they have a pill. It's really cheap, and it'll kind of numb the pain. There's a few side effects. We won't be okay with it. We would not be okay with it. Or, you know, imagine that the government said we only will people if they're worthy, if they pass some test, go through an intake. And, oh yeah, we'll help you, but we won't help you. You know, you're just not what we're looking to help. So we wouldn't stand for that. You know, imagine it's your kid, right? We would not stand for that. If the government said public funds could no longer be available to your children beyond grade 9 because there was no more money, would you say, okay? We would not put up with it because we think our kids have a right to an education. They do, actually. They do have a right to an education. But we would not accept that you get only so much education. We would not accept that you only get so much help. You'll never heal, but we'll kind of help you a little bit so you don't feel pain. So when it snows, will we be happy if half the snow is removed? Like, municipal governments have toppled because of snow removal. I'm serious, they've toppled.
Talking to the
Public
Confederate
was so
here.
upset, the next, that regime was out. You know, would we be okay if the city crews or town crew, county crews, whatever they are, just filled the potholes halfway or filled every other one?
They do that.
I know, but are we happy about that? No. We expect all the potholes and all the snow. You know, just one more. So what if you were a single mom with a newborn on welfare and you were told you can have about half of what your child needs in formula for the month? Would you be okay with that? Because that's what happens. That's what actually happens. If it even lasts half a month. So why is it we refuse as a society to support people out of poverty? We kind of keep them poor. So for me, I know there are people, you know, we hear about people who are lazy, and are there lazy people? Sure, there's lazy, successful people too. But you know, that's why I wanted to mention I've worked on the front line. I didn't meet too many lazy poor people. And I didn't meet very many, probably no lazy homeless people. Wow, that's a lot of work to be homeless. Where am I going to eat today? I got to walk somewhere and get some food, then I got to get some clothes, and where am I going to sleep tonight? Always worried about someone, you know, hurting you. Will the police arrest me today? So, you know, my agents, the organization I worked for before I came to Tamarack, worked a lot with homeless people. They would walk 20 to 25 kilometers a day. I think maybe I walked 2. You know, and all ages. It's hard work to be in that condition. So I never really bought the argument that people who are poor kind of not getting into working because they work often harder than we do. Why do we put so many obstacles in their way? What are those obstacles about? Attitudes? About people who are poor? Or actual physical obstacles where you can't get help because you didn't fill out that form, you didn't talk to the right person, or whatever. So these are rules, I call these rules of estrangement. These are actual things that either have been said, that I've heard be said, or it's what was said meant. We can only help you when you virtually have next to nothing. So in other words, you got to be so down in the dumps that there's really no chance you'll ever recover. And that will give you far less money than you need to actually survive. If you're on welfare and begin to make money, we're obliged to take back the same amount of welfare. Now that's changing. You heard some of that today about Clam when Brian was speaking. But it's still pretty true across the board. Like as soon as you start getting ahead, you get it right back. You can have one food hamper a month. We don't appreciate cheaters. I actually had a food bank director tell me. Well, I don't get that. Why can't you have 2? Well, if you're hungry, why can't you have 2? Why just 1? Why is it that we set those rules, right? we'll house you for a year and support you. After that, you're on your own. Now, that's a Housing First program in Alberta. That's what they say. And for lots of chronically homeless people, that works. They need help, they need support for a year, and then, you know, if we're doing our job, lots of them will be okay. But lots of them won't, because they're mentally ill. So there are folks that we house that need support forever, but we still think within a year you should be okay, because we treat all poor people the same. We treat them as a homogeneous group. It'd be like treating all men the same, all women the same. Like we don't really deal with the people that we're talking about. And this was the story, I think I mentioned this this morning. You need a winter coat, sit there, fill out this form, and wait for an intake. And the story came from my organization when, and it really started when a couple, father and his daughter came in winter, and neither of them had a coat. They asked for my receptionist, they need a coat. And it was late in the day, and so there's no intake worker here, you have to come back tomorrow. Had I been there, I would have flipped. But my EA walked by and heard that, and just said, no, come with me, get you a coat. Well, actually, the dad could see the coats, they were that close, they were in the door. So I got a coat, and Mary made sure he got, and his daughter got a mitts and all the stuff he needed. And then I started asking my staff, I said, why do we put people through intakes for coats? Well, maybe they got a coat last week, and we should know that. Okay, but like they come in and it's winter, they don't have a coat. What am I gonna say? You got a coat last week, so too bad, go out to the cold, right? So what we did, the short story is, we really talked, we looked at what our own values were, and we were kind of putting people through the ropes to get a coat. We had no problems getting coats. Bissell Center raises $1.5 million a year in in-kind goods, and like 600,000 diapers a year. Like, if I need anything, I just tweet and things show up. That's how well known our organization was. So we never ran out of coats. That wasn't the issue. It was like we had this attitude, like somehow you had to be assessed if you needed a coat. How humiliating it would be to be a dad and your daughter in the middle of winter, just to walk in without a coat, and then to go through that. So we changed the rules. Now, you come in and say, I hope they're still doing that. I have to go back and check. If you come in and need a coat, we say, okay, you can have a coat, and they're over there. Go find one that fits. Do you have any mitts? Take some mitts too. Nobody takes 4 coats. Nobody stuffs stuff in their pocket. They don't come back the next day. Like, people just get what they need. And so we started thinking about what else could we do. It was, you come in and we'll give you what you ask for. Like, what a foreign concept. Yeah, we'll just give it to you. Like, we had that with food. We serve maybe 150,000 meals a year in the drop-in center, and then also in our free daycare center, and whatever other meals 3 times a day would be. And sometimes we heard that families were poor. We didn't do food hampers, so we don't give them any food. 1 flight down and 30 steps to the left was enough food that would feed us for a year. But no one thought, well, can't we just give that woman and her kids some food? Like, so I said, yeah, someone asks you for food, give it to them. Just give it to them. You don't need to tick it off on a stat form, or, so we create we create those rules. And sometimes we just should give people what they ask for. So the marginalization of the poor, I've already talked, they don't do that to themselves. We do it to them. And poverty is not really a personal problem. It's more like a disease. And 3 million Canadians are poor. Well, 3 million Canadians live below the poverty line, but our poverty line is so low, it's actually more. Our poverty line is so low you can't live on that. So it's really, as I demonstrated this morning with a single mom and 2 kids who was a school teacher, she still couldn't live on her own. With the salary and the cost of living that the BC government actually said she would make on their website, and how much their cost would be to live in Vancouver or Revelstoke. She could not make it as a school teacher, based on what the BC government said. I keep stressing that, so you know, yeah, Mark, you tweaked that on that right now, based on what the BC government said. 3 types, lots of you know this, but we're trying to move from just poverty alleviation like Band-Aids. Now, when someone to me would come into the drop-in center and Bissell Center and be hungry, we would feed them. That's a Band-Aid, but they're hungry. So you don't stop one, but you have to do more than that, because they'll just keep coming back, and we'll keep feeding them, right? So, but it's more what the people call a charity model, kind of keeps that cycle of dependency going. And what we found when we started really engaging our homeless people who came to the drop-in, like they didn't want to come to the drop-in every day. It wasn't like that was, oh, this is great, I can come to the drop-in every day and get free food. They wanted a job or a house or a home. Or some of them wanted to get home, whether it's back to the reserve or back to Ontario to be with their family. They didn't want that. They wanted help to get out of their situation. Poverty reduction is more about creating some structural change. Some of you mentioned that. We need to change some things so poverty rates go down, or more people get lifted out of poverty. We start talking a little bit more about prevention, how do we prevent it, and so forth. And then poverty elimination often starts focusing on universality. So that's where the guaranteed annual income is coming from. Conversations about that. That would be a universal benefit. Most of us don't need that, right? We make more than that, whatever we. But some communities talk about universal public transportation. I'm an advocate in big cities for free public transportation. And I've sat with my mayor talking about that, and I showed him how he could finance it. So I wasn't just kind of a social advocate yapper. And what he said to me is, I don't think I can sell it. And I get that part. Timing maybe not be right. But that's when we start looking at real structural changes that could actually start lifting people out of poverty. People first, not rules first. And as we move in that direction, the economic cost of poverty decreases. And what increases is people start participating more in the economy. When people go to work, they pay taxes. And the more money they make, the more taxes they pay. And the more stuff they buy from businesses. And so there's all kinds of benefits to taking all the people who are poor and people who are unemployed and putting them to work, even if they can't work full time. So Bissell Center has a casual labor program, puts 14,000 job placements in the year that I left. Put about $1 million in the pockets of the casual laborers. They got everything that they were paid. We didn't take any money from them. And they're all homeless. 80% of them are homeless, lining up every day to go to work. They want to work. And so some of them, they don't have a lot of choices, but they want to work. People want to work. Even folks who are mentally ill who can't work full time, they want to work as much as possible. 2 days a week. We forget that. I think everybody needs to work in the way that we do. So what does poverty management look like? These are all the government programs that I could fit on a list. I think there's more. Family and youth allowances, child tax benefit, pensions for the war veterans allowance, grants to Aboriginal persons and organizations, goods and service tax credit, employment insurance benefits, on and on. You can read the whole list. All totaling into these billions of dollars. I don't tell you that really as a pejorative kind of statement. I'm just saying, take a look. What do you think? It seems kind of crazy to me. It has so many departments dealing with income. That's why some people are starting to advocate for a guaranteed annual income, because we're already doing some of that in a really inefficient way. So $82 billion for government operations. And that's when people see it as, well, that's lots of fat in the government, and I'm not saying there isn't any, but it's about how we're choosing to spend our money and all these different programs. what if we don't only have one? What if we only have one program that guaranteed your annual income? Why would we need all these others? If we're just going to start thinking that way, and actually have a guaranteed annual income that actually is reasonable. It also looks like this: food banks, soup kitchens, clothing banks, low wages. You want to keep people poor, or you keep paying them low wages and no benefits? Shelters, drop-in center, already got drop-in, well, soup kitchens, drop-in centers, budgeting programs. So I'm sorry, I think people need to have budgeting and financial empowerment stuff, but when you have no money, that's not the answer for you. You need some money before you can budget it. Fragmented assistance, inadequate assistance. Do you know what a single person gets here in BC for welfare?
$610.
Well, it's gone up because I thought it was 605. So it's really going up a lot. $605. And then the government will actually divide it in two chunks and say, this is how much you should spend on shelter, this is how much you should spend on food. $605 if you're on welfare. Now, whether or not you think welfare is a good idea, or you think there's some people on welfare that shouldn't be, picture in your mind people who you would think are deserving of some help when they're in a jam, and then ask yourself, is 605 the right number? Because I don't know how anyone could live on that. They don't. So that's why we have issues around crime, with people living in substandard housing, crowded housing, and with people kind of just resorting to drugs and alcohol. Like drugs and alcohol for a lot of folks is an escape from the misery of your life. And I can't really say I wouldn't do the same thing. I don't know if you could either. We also underfund third sector work. Like, I have people working in my organization when I got there who were living below the poverty line. And our mission was to end poverty. So we had to fix that. Philanthropy is also key, because it's very selective about how we do it. And philanthropy is never controlled by poor people, it's controlled by us. So we have this huge sector, 180,000 charities, and then people say there's too many of them, and I always say, how many should there be? I don't know how many there should be. 2 million employees, 8% of GDP. It's about the size of BC, like the economic contribution. So I'm not saying do away with it. I'm saying, wow, what a powerhouse sector. We just need to change what we're doing. We need to change how we work, and we should be able to do that because look how big we are. Start thinking a little more that way. Poverty management creates more poverty. The longer you are poor, the more likely you will be poor longer. There's that, at some point that transitional stage, it just disappears. And then you just keep cycling it. And it costs us more money. It creates more divisiveness, more discrimination. More people go to jail. People in jail are predominantly poor, and Aboriginal and brown. Mentally ill. I think something like 70% of the women who go to jail have been sexually abused. So, why is that? Why would it be just those people who go to jail? Charitable giving, I said this earlier today, charitable giving is not going to save all our problems. Like, Canadians give, a lot of Canadians give, 84-85% of Canadians give. The average gift's $114. So, and again, I'm not being critical of that, I'm just saying $114 isn't going to cut it in terms of some of the changes we need to make. So here's some worrisome trends, and the folks who were with me earlier saw some of them, but not all of them. But the number of single, unattached, working age adults living in poverty has doubled since 1980. So going from about 500,000 to 1.2 million. And since 1981, I don't know what our population was in Canada, but I can tell you it hasn't doubled. We don't double that, you know, populations don't double that. 44% of poor households have at least one person in the household who's working. This is Canadian figures. That's almost half. So it's not like people aren't working, because they can't make ends meet. The average poor household in Canada relies on income that's 33% below the poverty line. So when we say there's a poverty line of LICO, and LICO, I use LICO as an example, and we say it's at a certain, let's say in a certain community it's 24 grand, and that's not, I tell you, it won't be enough to fund the family that says 20, or they say 24 grand at work. Most people are 33% below. Low-income workers are about 3 times less likely to have health and dental benefits. So not only are you making less money, you're not getting any dental care. So you get jammed up, you're kind of screwed. Now this one really worries me. The way our participation rate's going in the economy, we have more people working, right? The population grows, more people work, but we have more people living longer. So the participation rate is the percentage of people who are in the workforce. And it used to be 6.5 workers per senior, and in 2006 it became 5, and StatsCan says, forecasts say by 2056 it'll be 2 workers per senior. Like, what will that mean? What will that mean for your local community? What will, not just for our country, like where will the, how will taxation be affected? What will happen to revenues for governments? What will happen to our healthcare budget? Like, people aren't, like, all these things are predictable, and we're not paying enough attention to them. 20 years ago, I sat and listened to a guy named David Foote talk about the demographics in Edmonton, about how in 20 years, we're going to be shutting down schools because the birth rate's so what it is. Nobody paid any attention. And 20 years later, while they're building schools, they're shutting schools down. How did that happen? Because we just didn't pay attention to the data. So I don't know how would you take that into your community? So what do we do about that trend? Probably find out more about it than just one picture from Mark, right? But what's going to happen? What do we do about it? The Payroll Association of Canada says almost half of Canadians live paycheck to paycheck. So think of, and what the Payroll Association says is what they mean by that is if they lost a paycheck, it might be 1 or 2 paychecks until they were homeless, lost their place. CMHC tells us that 1.6 million Canadians are at risk of losing their homes. So we have a government entity telling us that bad news. When we looked into working poor, because more and more people are working poor, the health of the working non-poor, and it's just people reporting on their own health. 6% in '96, 7% in 2009. If you're not poor, you're about the same. Working poor has gone from 9% to 16%, saying I'm not healthy. And non-working poor, even higher. So if you're not even working, that rate's gone up. What does that mean? What does that mean to our healthcare costs? What does that mean? How do we turn that around? That's just not, it's not only good for them, it's not good for us. It's not good for business, it's not good for anything to see people in that situation. And the small graph here is just a credit card debt. Like, that's gone, that's, can you see the year? 2000, so 15 years. What's happened to credit card debt? I'm not debt, credit card debt, sorry. That would include, I believe, your mortgage too. So the amount of debt that Canadians are accumulating is very troubling because most people's salaries over the years are staying like this. Very small growth unless you're wealthy. In terms of child poverty, Canada doesn't do too bad, but in the top 10, you see Finland, Netherlands, Denmark, Iceland, Norway, Slovenia, Sweden, Austria. Most of these, I don't know about all of them, but most of these are Scandinavian, higher taxed. You pay more taxes, say in the Netherlands, in Sweden, and the Scandinavian country, and you get more back. So they tend to be healthier. Child poverty rates are much lower than in Canada, in the US, I just didn't show the US. So what does that mean about how we see community and what's going on in other countries that's working when we say, well, we don't want any more taxes. I'm not saying I want more, I'm not saying I want any more taxes either. But we should be looking at these things. Like, why does it work over there? Why are there less children who are poor? Why are more people able to go to university in these countries than here? Why can the Netherlands, I think, have such a robust economy and have a very high minimum wage? When someone here told me it was $20 an hour. 21? How does that work? Like, why can they do that and still have a healthy, vibrant community? We should at least look at that. That's what we want. The National Council on Welfare, which I think Harvard did away with, hopefully it'll come back. In a 2007 report said poverty could be eliminated for half the cost of data management. Now, from a business point of view, if you had that opportunity, would you jump at that? Right? You could cut your costs by half. You spend $10 to save $20. Like, who wouldn't do that? But we're not. So let me give you some sense of the cost. Prison, depending on if it's provincial or federal, and if you're a male or female, because the difference 55 to 155 grand a year per prison. We're building more. Yeah, we're building more prison. We're building more. We're spending money on prison. Homelessness, about 100 grand a year. Hospitalization, 120 grand a year, per year. Shelters, 23 to 45 grand a year, depends on the shelter. So these are expensive. So a homeless person who would stay in a shelter every day of the year could cost us 45 grand. That's more than I pay for a house. Can you see the Safe Ticket Act? This is a Toronto example of something really dumb. So the Safe Street Act tickets was really a way to stop homeless people and poor people from being a nuisance, panhandling, and kind of getting in the way, and being aggressive around, cleaning your windows when you're in your car. And so they started giving tickets. Between 20,000 and 2010, 67,000 tickets for $4.04 million. The cost of the police, $936,000 to issue and process these tickets, and the fines paid, $8,086. Because homeless people don't have the money to pay the tickets. So here we thought, you know what? These homeless people, they're such a pain. Let's just give them a ticket. They'll go away, right? So look, that's how much money we could have housed people for that. $928,000 that the police wasted. I can tell you that's not the only dumb thing we do. So here's some solutions. Keep in mind these costs. Most social housing programs do cost more, but on average, it costs to house a person for a year and supplementing some social housing about $2,400 a year. Now, some communities maybe it's $3,000, but it's not $100,000. Rent subsidies, cost more, but it's still cheaper than homelessness. Now, I don't know how sustainable all the subsidies are that we provide, because we have other economic problems. But at least, like, why are we spending all this money? Housing First, we know Housing First is successful. I ran a large Housing First team. We were very successful housing people, chronically homeless people almost 8 to 12 years to get into our program. Our benchmark from our funder was after 18 months, they had 85% need to be housed, and we beat that benchmark. So, fairly successful program. It still costs 35 grand a year. Better than 100. But then I realized we have lots of homeless people who don't qualify for Housing First because they're not chronic enough. So we created our assertive outreach team. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. but they go out and find homeless people, and they house them. That's the job they do. That's about 10 grand a person. The community bridge, I'm gonna go into that. We created a program to prevent eviction, and that's the lowest cost of all. And then I was working on a project with a developer in the city. If the city would give us land, we could build a fourplex for people, and we could actually, if we gave it away, it would cost $9,600 per person a year. We gave it away, but we also figured out we could do it and charge about $500 a month rent. So people on pension, like low-income pensions, could actually live there. So there's some partnerships we could do in the big cities, because they have lots of land, and I hope they're still working on it. So I'm going to come back to this in a little bit. How am I doing for time? Never pay attention.
It's 8 o'clock.
Okay. So I'm going to race through this stuff. One of the things I'm interested in us doing, Tamarack, is helping communities build capacities to take care of their own stuff. Because, and you're doing that. Like, I've learned so much in the day I've been here about things that are happening in the basin where you're actually taking control of things and making things happen. So I think governments need to fund more capacity building as opposed to social programs. Help you build capacities. Leadership in communities, skill development. So this was a project that we did when I ran my consulting company, and this was my colleague Anna Rule. And so we bid on doing a prototype of a different way of doing area redevelopment plans. It's about your sewers and infrastructure in Balmacaulay, which is the poorest neighborhood in Edmonton. And so we won that bid. And Anna's a community developer, and so we set up a community office, and people started coming, and so she had to train them on what is infrastructure, right? How do you know what even to want and not want? The short story of this was one, very successful works, all because of Anna, not because of me. I didn't hardly do anything in this project. One awards, she actually spoke at conferences about a whole new way of doing area redevelopment plans that weren't contained inside the city where city planners were doing it. Empowering community to make decisions and so forth. And what she was so good at is that as soon as you bring community together, they bring other things up. Do you think they're only going to come and talk about sewers? Right? They're going to talk about other things going on in their community. So they start talking about this drug fortress. It was literally a fortress. Iron bars and steel doors, shutters on the windows, and they sold drugs out of this thing right in McCall. The police couldn't get rid of it, nobody could get rid of it. Agencies like mine couldn't figure out how to get rid of it. And the community said, we need to do something about that. And so they had one meeting, and here was their strategy. It's unbelievably good, but we never thought of it. We're just going to hang out there. Enough people are going to hang out in front of the drug house. And then, so would you pull up your car, get out, and walk through a crowd of people to get your dope? Like, it was unbelievable. The answer from community would have made us all look like idiots. Right? And within 6 months, they were gone. And then the city bought it, and it became Kindred House for a while, which became a place for street prostitutes to hang out. That's community development. It's like one of the best community development lessons I've ever had. So some other examples in terms of what we can do in communities, and I mentioned this morning, focus on the game changers. Don't go and try to deal with 23 things in your community. Is it housing? Is it income? Is it we need more childcare? Is it early childhood learning? Is it mental health? What is it? The one or two things that if you actually changed things, life would get better. In our school systems, if we focus more on getting all kids to read to grade 3 level or better, the odds of them graduating from high school are like quadrupled. So let's focus on that. That's what's called a Keystone outcome. Let's focus on that. Let's make sure every kid reads at a grade 3 level. Hamilton, this is an example of choosing what to do with money, because I've heard from cities, I love our mayor in Edmonton, but he'll also say, I don't have the money for that. And I'll say, we have money for our arena. Right, $600 million the city's putting into an arena. And then he looks at me like, yeah, okay. Well, here, Hamilton just sold a bunch of their hydro, and they're putting $50 million from the sale, I think it's the whole sale, into poverty reduction. That's a choice. I mean, a choice. It's incredible. What leadership from Mayor Eisenberg, and then Berger, and also then the council, because he only had 2 votes against it. So, $50 million, and for housing. So there are 2 things. Remember, there are 2 things: more housing, and to leverage that with the province and the feds. They're $50 million. But the other thing they're going to go and do is focus on neighborhood development, especially around high school graduation. Because what their chief of staff is telling me is we have neighborhoods where 2/3 of our kids aren't graduating from high school, and we need to fix that. Local efforts like vibrant communities, and I always put, be kind and accommodating. So here's the things I wanted to race through about breaking rules. I love Picasso's quote, and so this is a prototype. It's probably now no longer a prototype at Business Center. But I got tired of seeing people evicted and no one helping them. And there's a long story, I don't have time to tell you, but there was an incident that just totally pissed me off. And I decided to raise money and create a bridge fund so we could help people who were going to be booted out of their apartment, like a single woman and a single kid. That was the example. And then I started talking to others around, we need to do something like this. We need to help people not be evicted. Like, we need to prevent homelessness. It's in the 10-year plan, but no one was doing it. But I also said, I don't want any rules. I don't want anyone to tell me I can't give anything over $500, or you only can come to us once every 2 years. All that crap that we put into our rule books. Yeah, that was a hard sell. The only rule I wanted was that you have to agree for my staff to come visit. Here to help. And of course, if they didn't open the door, then we were out of luck. Anyway, here's what the community bridge is, and I'll explain a little bit more later. So it's a rapid response. Is when people are going to be evicted, they show up and say, we're going to be evicted in 2 days. So we have to respond right away. It stops an imminent eviction, provides bridge funds to ward off that eviction. We pay for the eviction not to happen. Now, we negotiate with landlords because it's going to cost them money to do an eviction. So if the tenant owes $1,000, we might say, we'll give you $800. And then you need to preserve their tenancy. And then we follow up and say, what caused that eviction? How can we help you so you're not evicted again? Did you lose your job? What happened? How can we, maybe you need to move. We'll help you move. Have workers will help you move. And so the rules were no ceiling on the size of the loan or the grant. No rules about how often one can access the program. No requirement to participate in any other program. No tax returns or other financial information required. We took people at their word. But we also would see the eviction notice, so we knew they were being evicted. We said, I hope you'll be able to pay us back one day. But we'll never ask you. Some people are paying us back. And you need to agree to follow up for our rules. That was it. Really, that was it. And people thought I was crazy. People are going to keep coming back, and you're going to, they want to ask you for $8,000 because they're way behind on this and that. No one ever did that. In fact, we did research and anticipated our loans would be our grants would be between $1,000 and $1,200, and we were pretty bang on. Somewhere less, somewhere more. The average was about, I think $1,200. and added our staff to it, its cost was $2,000. We stopped evictions of 206 people for $2,000 a family, not a person, $2,000 a family. And only one family came back in a year. Only one return. And we helped them. In the second year, now that I've been gone, I'm waiting, Gary, the CEO there now is going to send me the data because I'm actually trying to get national interest in this program. It's so successful. And locally in Edmonton, they want to fund it. They want to scale it up. No rules, just tell me people stay. And then the other thing is, imagine if you're thinking of a housing first, $35,000 a year for housing first. We worry about people coming back for eviction stop. Well, you could come back 6 times and only spend $12,000. That's still less than half of housing first. So maybe if we kept helping that person, eventually they won't come back, right? We don't think that way. We think in punitive ways around, you only can come once, do your food hamper once a month, this and that. And we tried this. I didn't know if it would be successful. Like, I was putting my reputation on the line, right? Some of my staff thought I was great. You're just gonna give it to them if they ask you? Like, oh, landlord's gotta show them that they owe the money. Anyway, so let me carry on because I know we're running out of time. So this is one of Bissell Center's buildings. This is the drop-in center and offices on top. And as you can tell, we work a lot with that. I talk like I still work there, you know, but I love that. So we had all these people who come to the drop-in center. And these people are homeless and they weren't being helped in their housing first. So I wondered why. Like, how come can't even house people who are in our drop-in center? So we put together a team called the Housing Outreach Team. And I realized that other drop-in centers, they also had homeless people, no one was housing them. Housing first didn't work for them. They weren't chronic enough. So we created this team, and those 3 numbers I think are still there. I think there's 2 more. And we raised some money, and I said I want you to house in the next year 250. So where'd you get that number? I just kind of made it up. But that's your only job. What do you mean it's our only job? If you're on the street, you're in our drop-in center, and you go on, there are a couple others I said you should go there, and also the library or homeless people hang out. You go up to a homeless person and say, hi, I'm Mark from Business Center. Are you interested in getting a place? Yes, I am. Well, let's go, let's do it right now. Okay, come with us right now and we'll find you a place to live. And my staff said, well, you think we could do that? So when we know hundreds and hundreds of landlords, and even if we couldn't do it the first night, maybe we could do it the second time, but help them right away. No, give them a ride somewhere. No, I have a health need, we'll take you to the nurse. You're only in business to house people. That's all you do. All you do. And if they say no, or they don't trust you, next time you see them, ask them the same thing, because they'll be there on the street. So they house of 250 people in a year for $10,000 a person. Housing first is 35. And like they're going crazy, like they think, wow, this is incredible. And now housing first funders want to fund this program because it's cheaper and it works. But it was a little upside down because that's the only thing you will do. You're only going to house people. That was hard for them. Well, what if they're injured? Call a medic. Right? But no, don't drive them anyplace. You're not there to counsel them, take them to income security, nothing. Housing, that's the only job. And they finally got it and they couldn't finally work. One more example, this was another place where I worked. We developed this multi-purpose center, and in the offices and houses on each side, in the middle of community center, about 130 people can eat there 3 meals a day, all for people 55 and over. We wanted it to fit in the neighborhood, so our roof line's no higher than any other. In fact, it's lower than other houses in the neighborhood. And this is this building here, and it's also here behind the trees, a rooming house. 40 people live there, and they're all hard to house seniors. And so these were seniors that were street people, or living in rundown rooming houses, who were drinkers and drug addicts and not so nice people. our clients, and we were, this was in 1985, I think we were the first Housing First agency in Edmonton. Because I think Housing First history goes back to around the mid-80s. I never heard of Housing First back then. Our premise was if we house them, life would get better for them. And so we fought tooth and nail with the government. They finally funded it, and I denied to fight tooth and nail for the design. But I had some MLAs on the side, so it helps to know people. But here's the interesting story. They were also involved in this, our clients were also involved in the design, especially on the side of the greenhouse. Anyway, when it came time, we were about to, maybe a month or two away from opening, and we said, we're going to have to figure out who we're going to house. And we probably should have thought about that even sooner. But what's our language? What's our admission criteria? And so we started doing the same old admission criteria, right? Well, you know, you can't drink, you have to be paying your rent, you can't do this, you can't do that. And then it hit me a little like, we're supposed to be having a rooming house for hard to house seniors, right? Street people. How can that be our criteria? Because like, we won't fill it with anybody. And we just kind of had this catharsis where we realized, actually, everyone else's eviction criteria should be our admission criteria. So we explored that. You had to have, so to live there, the short story is, because we broke free of our whatever old ways of working, you had to have a history of not paying your rent, of damaging suites, of drinking too much, or doing drugs too much, or just being a general obstinate pain in the butt. Not all of those things, but you had to have a history to live there. And it was bizarre. Like, imagine us, like, that's what was bizarre for us to actually go there. So we did that, and then we had, those were the people we housed. And they were allowed to drink there, so it was a harm reduction as well. And you know what? I would say 65 to 70% of our tenants, their lives improved markedly. Some quit drinking, some drank less. Health went up, social skills went up, there was places to go. And, you know, but there were still some who were pretty much the same. So we thought it was successful. And it became, the government who was so much against it, then it wanted to tour us internationally. And we declined. We did our own promotion and speaking about it. So those are three real quick examples of being innovative, thinking upside down about some things, doing what sometimes we don't think of doing, like having a program that just saying the only thing we do is house you. It's like, how many times will we actually create a program where we're saying no all the time to anything but one thing? Like, that's kind of for community agencies. For government, sometimes that's the norm, but for communities, that's not our norm. And to build a structure in team with street people. We did design sessions with homeless people. Like, we found a way to do that. And they showed up and helped us design this structure. I'm going to skip that. I want to talk a little bit about poverty. Is not really an economic problem, it's a human rights issue. We have a right to work, we have a right to have a place to live, we have a right to an education. We have lots of rights in our country, and we also sign on for rights with the UN Charter, a legally binding document with other countries. And the question, so some of these questions are not economic questions as the first thing we consider. It's what's our right? What is our right to a job, to an income, an adequate income? That's the conversation we should be having. I don't know if I know the answer to it. We probably have a lot of different opinions. I mean, by a right to an income, we don't mean everyone should make $70 an hour. Like, we'll go down the tubes. But what does an income mean as a right first? Or housing, what does that mean? I have a right to safe, affordable housing. We should be having those conversations. And start not seeing some of these things as charitable activities, but a right to a dignified life, as Nelson Mandela tells us. So, economic decisions then might be exercised within the context of our human rights. For example, we should not lock up a homeless person because it's more economically viable than housing and supporting them. And I mentioned this morning, there are some movements afoot about locking up homeless people without any due recourse of law if they're drunk. Not drunk hockey fans coming out of the arena, homeless people. Our system should ensure equal access to our rights. So, for example, disabled children should have the same rights to an education as any other child, but they don't. Because we see it as a financial, it's like a budgetary issue, as opposed to saying to government, you have to do that, it's that child's right. We've got to kind of figure out what are our rights, and then what other things are not our rights that are optional. Shareholders do not have a right for a profit. They certainly have an expectation or they'll lose their money, but it's not the same. So what are our rights, and then how do we define them together as a community? Because you can't have one group say, living wage that's $29 an hour, and businesses say, well, I just can't do it. I'm just part of business. But it also can't be businesses decide all by themselves what a fair wage is. Workers need to be involved in that too. Or our system should be about ensuring the protection of our human rights when such rights are not being delivered. So slum landlords exist because in my city, we don't hire enough people to check on slum landlords. It's against the law what they're doing, but we also say, like, well, there's no other place to put these people. Well, so we're okay with slum landlords? Let's put them somewhere else. Let's build something. Find a better land. That's about rights, making decisions about rights. So, what does power reduction through human rights lens look like? Safety nets that reduce poverty and are efficiently delivered. So, getting $610, that's not enough if you're in dire straits. That's not enough money. Actions and programs that empower people who are living in poverty so they can move out of it. We need more community development that involves people who are struggling. People first approaches rather than rules rich approaches. Our community bridge was a people first approach. A shift in how we see and use money. We need to see money differently. I don't know all the answers to that, but how we're looking at money today is primarily an individual thing, is hurting our communities. So eventually, businesses will suffer as the income gap continues and the wealth gap continues. It keeps growing and growing. So at the extreme is if one family had 95% of the money, do you think your business would be successful? Less me and more we. Coordinated efforts to end racism and discrimination. This is not appearing in as many plans as I'd like it in really substantive way. Like racism causes harm. Keeps people from getting jobs. It excludes people of color, or it excludes people of gender or sexual orientation, whatever those discriminatory things are, having the same opportunities as most of us do. And we need to stop that. It's wrong. It doesn't matter what the budget is. Racism, you can have racism. Racism will destroy us. And, so a human rights lens, again, talks about what is it that we must do to have the kind of community we want. And then how we make that happen. And then money becomes a part of that picture. And the big one for me, more local effort, control resources. I think cities and communities and towns should be advocating for a total shift in how taxation is done so that more money reaches local communities, because that's where decisions need to be made. Not just depending on the good graces of the province or the feds deciding what trickles down to local communities, but local communities are where people live. And so how could we look at our tax structures differently so that cities had more control over the things they should have control over, right? Not necessarily the healthcare system for the province, but local development and money that allows them to deal with transportation issues independently. That's a systems challenge that we need to do more about. And I'll just end with this quote. I'm a Nelson Mandela fan. Like slavery and apartheid, poverty is not natural.
we made it. And it can be overcome and eradicated by the actions. I believe that. I think many of you do, maybe all of you do. But I think poverty is solvable, and if we want to solve it, we will. And if we don't, then we bear responsibility for its continuance. So I'll stop there. I'm sure I'm way over time, but at least you weren't standing and making me nervous. Do you have a question?
Yeah, you touched briefly on basic income, and it's pretty much the biggest topic right now in the world today. Switzerland's about in 2 weeks to kind of finalize a vote on giving everyone $3,000 a month to live on. And Finland's the largest experiment in the world on basic income, and I think there's one Ontario community by the end of this year that's experimenting with it. Like, what has your group done to kind of begin to understand how municipalities can enter into that experiment?
Well, I think we're actually waiting to see what some of those results are. We are in a partnership with the Ontario government in a number of areas, and guaranteed annual income. They're looking into that. We're keen to get involved with that. Tamarack's been quite I don't want to say leader, that's the wrong word, catalyst around living wage. So we have lots of thought leaders that are working with living wage. We actually help maintain the living wage website and do lots of learning about living wage. I think living wage works up to a point, but it doesn't solve all of our problems. I think people should earn a reasonable wage, right? But in the example I used this morning, a woman who makes pretty good money as a single mom, she can't make it in Revelstoke or Vancouver with 2 small kids. So the other thing is look at all the money we're spending on social programs. Maybe we could guarantee everybody $3,000 a year. I'm not sure. I don't need it. I would like it. Like when we all love the government to give us $3,000 a year. I don't need $3,000 a year. But right, but other people do. So I don't know what those models are yet. And I think it's too soon, like for us as Tamarack, to be trying to lead into in a certain direction. That's not what we do. We see what's going on, and then we share that, whether it's what's going on in Finland or someone else who thinks it should be living wage or a business perspective that's different. We'll share that too. So we're not advocates of that. Yes.
So at its crux, poverty really is about an imbalance of power, right? And systemic forces that want to keep that imbalance in place. So how, as communities, can we start to address that? How do we go, all the way upstream?
Well, I mean, it's not an easy answer, right? But part of it is about the engagement, I think, of higher levels of government about getting more control in the hands of communities. Now, local communities can still screw it up, right? I mean, we're all imperfect people.
How can local communities have an impact on things like corporate taxes that we were talking about earlier?
Right, by becoming more engaged in actually their own community's development. Because I can tell you, I was telling the group this morning, provinces are noticing the movement across Canada around cities reducing poverty. Like they're going, holy cow, there's like all these cities who are taking, and they're finding money and they're doing stuff, and mayors are speaking publicly about what the province should do, and so they're paying attention. So the more that we can do locally, the more the eyes are on us, and sometimes they're uncomfortable eyes. And then the more able we are to do the kind of advocacy that we might want to do around these things. So it's like not any one thing. The more we're doing, the more voice we have, the more we can leverage the voice about corporate taxes. But the first thing that you need to do in your own community is have that conversation. And that's what I mean by start with trying to understand one another about how you feel about corporate taxes. And look at other data, like, corporations will say, well, we don't want to pay more tax, we can only get by as we are. Well, some of them are small businesses, some of them aren't. Like I reported this morning, the 5 banks, their profit, $35 billion last year. So that's a lot of money. So they could probably pay a little more tax as opposed to a small business. But personal taxes, they've gone up. Personal tax rates have gone up.
Not at the highest levels, they've gone down in BC.
Yeah, well, in the federal, if you look at corporate tax, it's been flat. and personal tax over the years has gone up, and now it's been staying flat.
Yeah. And I think it's a really good point on the tools that local government do or don't have, you know, being a mayor of a community. For every dollar of taxation that most people pay, about 11 cents of that goes to your local government, and the other 89 cents goes to the provincial and federal level. And most local governments really the only tool they have is land tax. They don't get a share of the sales tax, they don't get any income tax, they don't get any corporate tax. And so it becomes a real challenge when the majority of the services that people use on a daily basis, whether they're in poverty or not, when you flush your toilet, when you expect your streets to be plowed, when you expect there to be roads in front of your house, those are all local services that are being provided on 11% of the taxation.
Right. So you totally get it, right? So in the States, I lived in the States, I was born in the States, but I went back and lived there for 4 years. People say, well, we're taxed lower in the States. And you know what? In one way, that's true. I paid less income tax, but I paid a lot more in other things. Because cities had the ability to, and counties had the ability to tax gasoline or create plebiscites, or whatever they call them, where they could raise money. One county tax that they raised was all for homelessness. So our mayors and councils don't have that authority to do that. In Chicago, you not only have a state license plate, you have a city license. You can't drive your car without a city sticker, and it costs $90 to get it. You don't know, $90. $90 on 600,000 cars in Edmonton would fund half of what we need to go to free public transportation. So it's looking at different ways of generating the revenues we want and kind of linking them to their purpose. Taxing a car so you can fund public transportation, right? Well, people are starting to pay attention to that, and I think, but I really think it has to be talked about in your community. Because every community is a little different, especially big and small. Public transportation in cities are vital. I don't think you have a public rail system, transit system here, right? So what's the transportation issues here? Or what's the local tax base revenues that you really need to develop your community could look different, right? But why we don't do that is we end up arguing too much. Business argues with itself, social sectors argues with itself, they argue with one another, they're positional. I get it, totally get it. Instead of searching for the common ground and letting the differences lay and focus on what could we do together. Because most aspirations we all share. Healthy community, we want a strong economy, we want people to be good consumers, we don't want people to be drowning in debt. All those things that impact all of us. Housing should be reasonably affordable. You know, no one's against businesses making profits, and most small businesses barely get by. But when you've got huge businesses making $35 million and whose tax rate has gone down, are we really saying we should tax them higher? But maybe I'm not getting it, right? That's why I'm saying you have to have those conversations. I mean, you told my opinion is we should tax them more, but really there should be local conversations about it. I just think local communities could change. I think local communities can change the world. We just have, and I think we're working on changing lots of things, and I think if we keep doing it, then maybe it'll be after I'm dead and gone. But eventually, local communities will have more authority and more resources to work with. And I think we can learn from some of the Scandinavian countries. I'd like to see what happens in Finland. Like, people who live in those countries, they do pretty well. And they pay more tax, and there's more government, there's more universal programs. We don't even have universal health care. Most universal health care programs include pharmacare. Is anyone talking about what's going to happen when our senior population just keeps growing and growing and they have no access to pharmacare? Our health care is going to go up sky high as people go to emergency. So, you know, there's even that with the importance of universal health care. Should your community have something to say about that?